The first bullet whistled past Abigail Reeves' ear, tearing through the weathered wall of the abandoned barn as she crouched behind a stack of hay. Montana Territory, 1875, was proving to be far more dangerous than the Boston finishing school she'd escaped from 3 months prior. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched the leather satchel containing her life savings $200 that represented her only chance at starting a new life in Silvercreek. "Come out, little lady," a gruff voice called. "We don't want to hurt ya. Just hand over them valuables, and we'll be on our way." Abigail tightened her grip on the small derringer hidden in the folds of her dust-covered skirt. She'd purchased the weapon in a moment of foresight before leaving civilization behind, though she'd never imagined actually needing to use it. "I said come out." The man's voice grew impatient as the floorboards creaked under his heavy boots. Taking a deep breath, Abigail steeled herself. She would not surrender what little she had, not after everything she'd sacrificed to get this far. With trembling fingers, she cocked the small pistol. The barn door suddenly burst open with a thunderous crack. Sunlight poured in, silhouetting a tall figure in the doorway. "I believe the lady doesn't wish to be disturbed," a deep voice drawled. The would-be robber spun around, his pistol raised, but before he could fire, a deafening shot rang out. The man crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder and howling in pain. "Next one goes someplace more permanent," the newcomer warned, his voice calm as a still lake. "Now take your sorry hide and get before I reconsider my generosity." The wounded man scrambled backward, his face contorted with pain and fear. He stumbled out a side door, leaving a trail of blood droplets on the weathered planks. Abigail rose slowly from her hiding place, the derringer still pointed at the tall stranger who stood framed in the doorway. He was silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun, making it impossible to discern his features. "You can put that pea shooter down, miss," the man said, holstering his revolver with practiced ease. "If I meant you harm, that little toy wouldn't stop me anyway." As he stepped into the shadowed interior of the barn, Abigail got her first clear look at her rescuer. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the world. A dark Stetson cast shadows over a face weathered by sun and wind, but couldn't hide the startling blue of his eyes. His jaw was strong, covered with several days' growth of beard, and a thin scar ran along his left cheekbone. "Quinn Zabek," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "Most folks call me Quinn." Abigail lowered her derringer but didn't put it away. "Abigail Reeves," she replied cautiously. "I appreciate your assistance, Mr. Zabek, but I had the situation under control." A hint of amusement flashed across his face. "Is that why you were hiding behind the hay instead of riding far from here?" Heat rushed to Abigail's cheeks. "My horse was stolen yesterday. I was regrouping." Quinn's eyes assessed her from head to toe, taking in her torn dress, the soot smudges on her face, and the determined set of her jaw. "Where you headed?" "Silvercreek," she answered, deciding there was little point in lying. "I have a position waiting for me there. School teacher," he guessed, his eyes noting her proper speech and the book visible in her open satchel. "No." Abigail lifted her chin. "I'm to be the new proprietor of the mercantile. I purchased it through correspondence with the previous owner." Quinn's eyebrows rose slightly. "Harrison's place. Old man finally decided to head back east, did he?" Mr. Harrison passed away 3 months ago. His son had no interest in running a store in what he called this God-forsaken wilderness. I acquired it at a very reasonable price. "I bet you did," Quinn said, his tone suggesting he knew more than he was letting on. "Silvercreek's a 3-day ride from here. Without a horse, you won't make it before winter sets in, especially with that gang of thieves likely to return with reinforcements." Abigail's heart sank. She'd come too far to fail now. Her parents' farm had been foreclosed on after her father's death, her mother had retreated into a shell of grief, and her 3 younger siblings depended on the money she would send home. This mercantile was their only hope for a future. "I'll find a way," she said firmly, though she had no idea how. Quinn studied her for a long moment as if weighing something in his mind. "I'm headed to Silvercreek myself," he finally said. "Got business with the sheriff there." "You're welcome to ride double with me, though it'll slow us down some." Suspicion flared in Abigail's mind. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Let's just say I've got my reasons for not wanting to see a lady stranded out here, he replied cryptically. Besides, could be I'm curious to see how a city girl plans to run a frontier store. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Especially one that hasn't turned a profit in 3 years. Abigail's eyes widened. That wasn't mentioned in Mr. Harrison's letters. I reckon there's a lot that wasn't mentioned, Quinn said. So you coming or not, daylight's wasting and I aim to make 5 miles before sunset. Despite her misgivings, Abigail recognized that she had few options. Very well, Mr. Zabek, I accept your offer of transportation to Silvercreek. She tucked the derringer back into her pocket. But I want to be clear that this is a business arrangement only. I'll compensate you for your trouble when we arrive. Quinn chuckled. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Miss Reeves. He gestured toward the door. My horse is outside, name's Renegade. He's not fond of strangers, so let me do the introductions. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling prairie. Tethered to a post was the most magnificent horse Abigail had ever seen, a muscular black stallion with intelligent eyes that regarded her warily. This is Miss Reeves, Quinn said to the horse, stroking its neck. She'll be joining us for a spell, so mind your manners. To Abigail's surprise, the stallion lowered its head as if in greeting. Quinn effortlessly mounted, then extended his hand down to her. You'll ride in front where I can keep you from falling. With as much dignity as she could muster, Abigail accepted his help and found herself settled before him on the saddle, acutely aware of his solid presence at her back. His arms came around her to take the reins, creating a secure enclosure that was both comforting and unsettling. Hold tight, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. As they set off across the vast landscape, Abigail couldn't help but wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake. Yet something about Quinn Zabek's quiet confidence reassured her. Perhaps, just perhaps, her western adventure was finally taking a turn for the better. They rode in silence as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. Quinn guided Renegade with minimal movement, his body moving in perfect harmony with the powerful animal beneath them. We'll make camp soon, he said, breaking the stillness. There's a creek about a mile ahead with good shelter. Abigail nodded, her muscles aching from maintaining a proper posture for hours. Though she'd ridden before, the intimate proximity of sharing a saddle with a stranger, especially one as imposing as Quinn, made relaxation impossible. You're as stiff as a board, Quinn observed. Relax before you give yourself a permanent cramp. I'm perfectly fine, Abigail replied primly, though her back screamed in protest. Quinn's chest rumbled with quiet laughter. City women, always putting on airs even when there's nobody around to impress. Irritation flared within her. I was raised on a farm in Pennsylvania, Mr. Zabek. I'm no stranger to hard work or discomfort. I simply prefer to maintain a certain level of decorum. My apologies, he said, though he didn't sound particularly sorry. What brings a Pennsylvania farm girl all the way out here, investing in a failing business? Abigail hesitated. Her reasons were personal, painful, and none of his business. Yet something about the vastness of the land around them, the growing darkness, and the strange intimacy of their shared journey loosened her tongue. My father died last winter, she began quietly. The bank took our farm, my mother. She hasn't been well since then. I have 3 younger siblings, Emma, Benjamin, and little Sarah. They needed a future I couldn't provide in the East. Quinn remained silent, but she felt his body shift slightly, as if he were listening more intently. I saw an advertisement in the newspaper, she continued. A mercantile for sale in Montana territory. The price was within my means, barely. Mr. Harrison claimed it was a thriving business in a growing community. She sighed. I should have known it was too good to be true. Harrison wasn't a liar, Quinn said after a moment, just a dreamer. The store could be successful with the right proprietor. Silvercreek's got a new silver mine opening up north of town. Could bring prosperity if the vein's as rich as they think. Hope flickered in Abigail's chest. Truly, mining camps need supplies, Quinn confirmed. And miners pay in silver when they've got it. They crested a small rise, and below them lay a winding creek bordered by cottonwood trees golden in the last light of day. Quinn directed Renegade down the gentle slope toward a sheltered spot among the trees. "This looks like home for the night," he announced, dismounting with fluid grace before reaching up to help Abigail down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, numb from hours in the saddle. Quinn's strong hands steadied her, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary before he turned his attention to making camp. With practiced efficiency, he unsaddled Renegade, set up a small fire, and produced jerky, hardtack, and coffee from his saddlebags. Abigail tried to assist, but her city-trained hands proved less than useful at the unfamiliar tasks. "You'll learn," Quinn said, not unkindly, when she struggled to help with the fire. "Nobody's born knowing how to survive out here." They ate a simple meal as darkness settled fully around them. The coffee was strong and bitter, but warming in the cool night air. Stars emerged overhead, more than Abigail had ever seen, a dazzling canopy that made her feel small yet somehow connected to something vast and eternal. "It's beautiful," she whispered, gazing upward. "That it is," Quinn agreed, though when she glanced over, she found him watching her rather than the stars. He quickly looked away. "You should get some sleep. We've got a long ride ahead tomorrow." He offered her his bedroll, despite her protests, and settled himself on the other side of the fire with only his saddle for a pillow and his coat for warmth. As Abigail lay wrapped in his blanket, which smelled of leather, horse, and something uniquely male, she studied her enigmatic companion through the flickering firelight. "Why are you really helping me, Mr. Zabek?" she asked softly. Quinn was silent for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, his deep voice carried across the darkness. "Everyone deserves a fighting chance, Miss Reeves, even city girls with more courage than sense." Before she could respond, he rolled onto his side, presenting his back to her. The conversation was clearly over. Abigail listened to the night sounds, the gentle gurgle of the creek, the occasional hoot of an owl, the soft nickering of Renegade as he grazed nearby. Despite the discomfort of sleeping on the ground and the uncertainty of what awaited her in Silvercreek, she felt a strange peace settle over her. For the first time since leaving Pennsylvania, she wasn't completely alone. With that comforting thought, she drifted into sleep beneath the vast Montana sky. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong and the aroma of fresh coffee. Abigail opened her eyes to find Quinn already up, tending to a small fire where a battered pot sent aromatic steam into the crisp morning air. "You're a sound sleeper," he remarked, handing her a tin cup of the strong brew. "Good trait to have out here. Many folks never get used to the night sounds." Abigail accepted the coffee gratefully, hiding her embarrassment at having slept so deeply in the presence of a stranger. She had always prided herself on propriety, yet here she was, her hair tumbling loose from its pins, accepting breakfast from a man she'd known less than a day. "Thank you," she said, sipping the bitter liquid. It was barely palatable but wonderfully warming. "I apologize for not helping with the morning preparations." Quinn shrugged. "You needed the rest. Besides, I'm used to my own company." As they ate a breakfast of more jerky and hardtack, Abigail ventured a question that had been on her mind. "You mentioned business with the sheriff in Silvercreek. Are you a lawman, Mr. Zabek?" A shadow crossed his face. "Used to be. Now I just do odd jobs here and there." There was something in his tone that discouraged further inquiry, but Abigail's curiosity was piqued. "What kind of odd jobs require consulting with a sheriff?" Quinn's blue eyes met hers, a warning in their depths. "The kind best not discussed with proper ladies." "I see," she replied, though she didn't, not really. Are you a bounty hunter?" A mirthless smile touched his lips. "Something like that. Let's leave it there, shall we?" The tension between them lingered as they broke camp. Quinn was less talkative than the previous day, his movements brusque as he saddled Renegade and extinguished the fire's remains. Once again, Abigail found herself seated before him on the stallion, their bodies pressed close by necessity. The initial awkwardness returned tenfold, enhanced by the mysterious undercurrents of their conversation. The terrain grew more rugged as they traveled, the rolling prairie giving way to steeper hills dotted with pine and spruce. Quinn guided Renegade along game trails and shallow creek beds, clearly familiar with the country. Is this the main road to Silvercreek? Abigail asked after several hours of silence. No, Quinn replied tersely. The main road's 10 miles east, more traveled but also more watched. Watched by whom? Quinn sighed. Miss Reeves, has anyone ever told you that you ask too many questions? Frequently, she admitted. My father used to say my curiosity would be either my greatest strength or my downfall. Quinn's body relaxed slightly against her back. Smart man, your father. He was, she said softly, memories of her father's kind face and calloused hands rising unbidden. He taught me to read the soil, to understand the language of growing things. He believed education was the key to a better life, even for girls. He's the reason I can read and write better than most men. Yet here you are, heading to a frontier town to run a store instead of teaching in some fancy school back east. Life rarely follows the paths we envision, Abigail replied. Besides, I've always had an independent streak. The thought of being beholden to a school board of pompous men dictating what I could teach and how I should behave was unappealing. So instead, you'll be beholden to miners and cowboys and frontier wives, Quinn observed. At least they'll judge me by my merchandise and fair pricing, not by whether I'm properly submissive to male authority. The words came out sharper than she intended. Quinn chuckled. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. You might need it in Silvercreek. What do you mean? He hesitated. The town's changing. Used to be a quiet place, ranchers, a few prospectors, families trying to build something. The new mines brought different elements. Men who see the frontier as a place without rules or consequences. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air ran through Abigail. Are you suggesting I should reconsider my plans? I'm suggesting you should go in with open eyes, Quinn replied. Running that store won't be easy, especially for a woman alone. Some folks won't take kindly to it. I'm not afraid of hard work or disapproval, Abigail stated firmly. It's not disapproval you should worry about, Quinn said grimly. It's the kind of men who see a woman without protection as fair game. Abigail bristled. I don't need protection. I have my wits, my derringer, and a legal contract for that store. I'll earn respect through competence and determination. Quinn fell silent for several long minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Determination won't stop a bullet or a knife, Miss Reeves, but I admire your spirit all the same. They rode on as the sun climbed higher. Around midday, Quinn steered Renegade off the trail toward a small spring bubbling from between rocks. They dismounted to rest the horse and stretch their legs. Abigail winced as she straightened her back, her muscles protesting the long hours in the saddle. Quinn pretended not to notice her discomfort, allowing her to maintain her dignity as she walked stiffly to the spring. The water was crystal clear and ice cold. Abigail cupped her hands to drink, then splashed some on her face, washing away trail dust. When she turned, she found Quinn watching her, an unreadable expression on his weathered face. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing, he said, looking away. Just thinking you're either the bravest or the most foolhardy woman I've ever met. Perhaps a bit of both, she conceded with a small smile. Quinn returned the smile, transforming his stern features. For a moment, Abigail glimpsed what he might have looked like before life had hardened him younger, perhaps even carefree. The moment shattered at the distant sound of hoofbeats. Quinn's expression immediately darkened as he drew his revolver. Get behind those rocks, he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Stay down until I call for you. Heart pounding, Abigail obeyed, crouching behind a large boulder. She slipped her derringer from her pocket, clutching it with trembling fingers. 3 riders appeared on the ridge above them, rough-looking men with unshaven faces and hard eyes. Abigail recognized one as the would-be robber from the barn, his arm now crudely bandaged. Well, look what we have here, the wounded man called out. The hero himself, and all alone too. Where's your pretty little friend, Zabek? Quinn stood his ground, revolver held casually at his side. Riding for the law, Denton. Should be bringing back a posse any time now. The man called Denton laughed. Nice try. We've been tracking you since dawn. You're alone except for that woman, and she ain't no use in a fight. You willing to bet your life on that? Quinn asked mildly. Because that's the wager on the table. The 3 men spread out, hands hovering near their weapons. "You're outnumbered, Zabek," Denton growled, "and I owe you for my arm. Hand over your valuables and the woman, and maybe we'll let you live." "That's not going to happen," Quinn replied, his voice deadly calm. "Now you boys can ride away and keep breathing, or you can try your luck. Your choice." Tension crackled in the air as the standoff stretched. Abigail held her breath, finger resting lightly on the Derringer's trigger. The first shot came from the rider on the left, a hasty, poorly aimed bullet that kicked up dirt at Quinn's feet. In one fluid motion, Quinn fired twice. The first shot struck the shooter in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle. The second caught Denton's horse in the flank, causing the animal to rear in panic, throwing its rider. The third man got off a shot that grazed Quinn's upper arm before Quinn's return fire hit him square in the chest. He toppled from his horse without a sound. Denton scrambled for his fallen weapon, but froze when he felt the cold metal of Abigail's Derringer pressed against his temple. She had emerged from her hiding place, moving silently across the small clearing. "I wouldn't," she said steadily, surprised by the calmness in her voice. Quinn secured the wounded first attacker, binding his hands with leather thongs before turning his attention to Denton. "You should have taken my offer to ride away," he said, disarming the man. "You killed Buck," Denton spat, glaring at the motionless third rider. "He made his choice," Quinn replied without remorse. He glanced at Abigail, who still held the Derringer with unwavering hands. "You can lower that now, Miss Reeves. The situation's under control." Abigail stepped back, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The reality of what had just occurred, that a man lay dead not 10 feet from her, began to sink in. "What now?" she asked, her voice finally betraying a slight tremor. "Now we deliver these two to the sheriff in Silvercreek," Quinn said, efficiently binding Denton's hands. "They're wanted for more than just bothering you at that barn. Robbery, murder, cattle rustling, the list is long." Understanding dawned on Abigail. "You're not just heading to Silvercreek for business. You've been tracking these men," Quinn nodded. "Since they killed a rancher and his wife outside of Helena 3 weeks ago, the bounty will keep me fed through winter. So you are a bounty hunter, among other things." Quinn checked the wound on his arm, which was bleeding but not severely. "Though I prefer to think of myself as someone who balances the scales a bit." They secured the prisoners on their own horses, with the body of the man called Buck draped over his saddle. Quinn collected the men's weapons, tucking them into Renegade's saddlebags. "I owe you an apology, Miss Reeves," Quinn said as they prepared to resume their journey. "I didn't tell you the whole truth about why I was helping you. You were using me as bait," Abigail realized, an edge in her voice. Quinn had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Not exactly. I was already tracking them when I heard the commotion at the barn. Helping you was convenient for my purposes. I knew they'd follow us. And you didn't think I deserved to know that I was riding with a man who expected trouble." Her indignation rose with each word. "Would you have come with me if I'd told you? That should have been my choice to make," Quinn sighed. "You're right, I apologize. For what it's worth, I would have protected you regardless." Abigail wanted to stay angry, but found it difficult in the face of his honest admission. Besides, he had saved her life twice now. "Apology accepted, Mr. Zabek, though in the future, I would appreciate full disclosure of any plans that involve using me to lure criminals into the open." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Noted. And after what I just saw, I'm beginning to think you might be more capable than I initially gave you credit for." That move with the Derringer was impressive. "My father believed in practical education," she replied, allowing herself a small, proud smile. "Now, shall we continue to Silvercreek? I believe we have a delivery to make." The remainder of their journey was slower due to their prisoners, but thankfully uneventful. They camped that night in a defensive position, taking turns standing watch. Abigail insisted on taking her fair share of the duty, despite Quinn's initial reluctance. During her watch, while Quinn slept and the prisoners dozed fitfully, bound to trees, Abigail had time to reflect on the strange turn her life had taken. 2 days ago, she'd been alone, horseless, and in grave danger. Now she was traveling with a bounty hunter, had helped capture wanted criminals, and had even held a gun to a man's head. What would her mother think if she could see her now? The thought almost made her laugh out loud. Proper Mrs. Abigail Reeves, who insisted on gloves for afternoon tea and perfect posture at all times, would likely faint dead away. Yet there was something exhilarating about this wild country and the directness it demanded. Out here, one's actions mattered more than social graces. Your word, your courage, your ability to face challenges head-on, these were the currency of respect. When Quinn woke to relieve her, their eyes met across the dying fire, and something unspoken passed between them, a mutual recognition, perhaps, of seeing something unexpected and admirable in the other. "You should get some rest," he said softly, mindful of their sleeping prisoners. "Tomorrow we reach Silvercreek." Abigail nodded, suddenly reluctant for their journey to end. Despite its dangers and discomforts, there had been a strange freedom in these days on the trail, a simplicity she hadn't experienced since childhood. "Quinn," she said, using his given name for the first time, "thank you, not just for the rescue but for this." She gestured vaguely at the vast night sky, the sleeping horses, the wild country around them. He seemed to understand. "Sometimes we find parts of ourselves we didn't know were missing until we're far from everything familiar," he said quietly. His insight surprised her. "Yes, exactly that." Their gazes held a moment longer than necessary before Abigail turned away, settling into the bedroll with confused emotions swirling in her chest. She had come west for independence, for a fresh start, for the opportunity to build something of her own. Developing feelings for a bounty hunter with dangerous enemies was not part of that plan. Yet, as she drifted toward sleep, it was Quinn's blue eyes and rare smile that followed her into dreams. They reached the outskirts of Silvercreek by mid-afternoon the following day. The town was larger than Abigail had expected, sprawling along a creek that glinted silver in the sunlight, the source of both the town's name and its reason for existence. Main Street consisted of 2 rows of buildings facing each other across a wide, dusty thoroughfare. A church steeple rose at one end, while the other was anchored by a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Dollar Saloon. Between these landmarks stood the expected assortment of frontier businesses: a blacksmith, a livery stable, a small hotel, and about halfway down on the right, a substantial building with faded lettering that read Harrison's General Mercantile. Abigail's heart leaped at the sight of it, her store, her future. It was larger than she'd imagined from Mr. Harrison's description, with a covered porch running its length and large display windows, currently covered with paper from the inside. Their appearance with 2 bound prisoners and a corpse created an immediate stir. People emerged from buildings to watch as Quinn guided their small procession toward a squat, sturdy building with sheriff painted on its door. A tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest stepped onto the boardwalk, hand resting casually on his holstered revolver. His weathered face broke into a grin of recognition when he saw Quinn. "Zabek, you old devil. Bringing me more work, I see." Quinn dismounted, giving the sheriff a respectful nod. "Sheriff Miller, got 2 of the Helena murderers for you, plus one who won't be standing trial." He gestured toward Buck's body. Sheriff Miller's eyebrows rose as he noted Abigail still seated on Renegade. "And who might this be?" "Abigail Reeves," Quinn introduced her. "The new owner of Harrison's store." The sheriff's surprise was evident. "Harrison's store? Well, I'll be damned. Pardon my language, madam. We'd heard the place was sold, but nobody expected." He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. "A woman." Abigail supplied, dismounting without assistance. She extended her hand formally. "I assure you, Sheriff Miller, I am quite capable of running a business." The sheriff recovered his manners and shook her hand. "No offense intended, Miss Reeves, just surprised is all." "That store's been shuttered for months now. Town could use a good mercantile." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Abigail felt the weight of curious stares, some friendly, others openly skeptical. A murmur ran through the onlookers as they took in her travel-worn appearance and her arrival with Quinn and the prisoners. "Let's get these men secured," Sheriff Miller said, gesturing to his deputy to take charge of the prisoners. "Then perhaps you both would like to get cleaned up. The hotel has baths available." The thought of hot water and soap was nearly overwhelming after days on the trail. "That sounds heavenly," Abigail admitted. "I'll see to these men and collect the bounty," Quinn told her. "Why don't you go ahead to the hotel? I'll bring your satchel over shortly." Abigail nodded, suddenly awkward now that their journey was ending. What did one say to a man who had saved your life, shared his food and bedroll, and shown you glimpses of a self you never knew existed? "Thank you for everything, Mr. Zabek," she finally said, aware of the curious ears around them. "I am in your debt." Something like disappointment flickered in his eyes at her return to formality. "Just doing my job, Miss Reeves. Good luck with your store." With that inadequate farewell, Abigail turned and walked toward the hotel, acutely conscious of the whispers that followed in her wake. She held her head high, refusing to show any sign of the fatigue and emotion threatening to overwhelm her. The hotel proprietress, a plump woman named Mrs. Jenkins, was kindness itself once Abigail explained who she was. She provided a room, hot water for a bath, and even a clean dress to borrow until Abigail could retrieve her trunk, which had been shipped ahead. "Been wondering when you'd arrive," Mrs. Jenkins chatted as she helped fill the copper tub in Abigail's room. "Mr. Harrison's boy wrote that he'd sold the place to someone from back east, but he never mentioned it was a lady. Caused quite a stir when the deed transfer came through with a woman's name on it." "I imagine it did," Abigail replied, too weary to engage fully with the woman's obvious curiosity. "And arriving with Quinn Zabek, of all people. That man's got more stories attached to his name than there are stars in the sky." Mrs. Jenkins lowered her voice conspiratorially. "They say he used to be a Texas Ranger before something that made him hang up his badge and take to bounty hunting. Never stays in one place long." Abigail's heart sank at this confirmation of Quinn's transient nature, though she tried to tell herself it shouldn't matter. "He was kind enough to escort me when my horse was stolen," she explained, offering no further details. Mrs. Jenkins nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by this simple explanation. "Well, you rest up, dear. I'll send up some supper later. Tomorrow's soon enough to face the town." Left alone, Abigail sank gratefully into the steaming bath, letting the hot water soothe her aching muscles and wash away the trail dust. As her body relaxed, her mind continued to churn with thoughts of the store, her responsibilities, and despite her best efforts to banish him, Quinn Zabek. She had come west to be independent, to build something that would support her family and give her the freedom she craved. Developing feelings for a man, especially a wanderer with a dangerous profession, would only complicate matters. Better to focus on the task ahead, opening the store, establishing herself in the community, proving that a woman could succeed in this frontier world. Yet when a knock came at her door an hour later, her heart leaped foolishly. It was only Mrs. Jenkins with a tray of food and the news that her trunk had been delivered to the store. "And Mr. Zabek left this for you," the woman added, handing over Abigail's satchel. "Said to tell you he'd collected the bounty and paid your bill here for the week. Generous of him." "Yes," Abigail agreed, feeling strangely hollow. "Very generous." After Mrs. Jenkins departed, Abigail picked at her food without appetite. Had Quinn already left town? The thought brought an unexpected wave of sadness. She had known him only a few days, yet somehow the idea of never seeing him again left an ache in her chest. Foolishness, she told herself firmly. She had a store to open, a life to build, a family depending on her success. Romantic notions about blue-eyed bounty hunters had no place in her plans. With renewed determination, Abigail finished her meal and went to bed early, resolved to put Quinn Zabek out of her mind and face Silvercreek as the businesswoman she had come here to be. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the hotel window and a renewed sense of purpose. Abigail dressed in one of her own clean dresses, retrieved from her trunk, and arranged her hair in a simple but neat style. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman who gazed back tanned from days in the sun, with a confidence in her eyes that hadn't been there before. After a hearty breakfast in the hotel dining room, where she endured the curious stares of other patrons with dignified poise, Abigail set out for her store. The key had been waiting for her at the hotel desk, along with a sealed envelope containing the deed and final paperwork from Harrison's son. Walking down Main Street in daylight gave her a better sense of Silvercreek. It was a town in transition, part established community with families and permanent buildings, part rough mining camp with temporary structures sprouting at its edges. Men outnumbered women significantly, and Abigail felt the weight of male gazes following her progress. She kept her chin up and her pace steady, ignoring the whispers and occasional comments. By the time she reached Harrison's Mercantile, a small group of onlookers had gathered, making no effort to disguise their interest in the store's new proprietor. The building was solid and well constructed, with a wide porch and large front windows. Abigail climbed the steps and inserted the key into the lock with hands that trembled only slightly. The door swung open with a creak of disuse, and she stepped inside, breathing in the musty scent of closed spaces and old merchandise. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through gaps in the papered windows. The interior was larger than she had expected, with high shelves lining the walls and a long counter running along the back. Her trunk sat just inside the door, delivered as promised. It would need a thorough cleaning, fresh stock, and reorganization, but Abigail could see the potential immediately. This space could become the heart of the community, a place where ranchers, miners, and townspeople could find not only necessities but small comforts and luxuries to ease frontier life. Not much to look at, is it? The voice startled her. Quinn stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. He'd cleaned up since yesterday, shaved, changed clothes, though he still wore his gun belt and the same weathered Stetson. "It has potential," Abigail replied, trying to ignore the way her heart quickened at the sight of him. "Thank you for settling my hotel bill, though it wasn't necessary. I can pay my own way." Quinn stepped inside, closing the door against the curious eyes outside. "Consider it payment for your help with Denton and his gang. That bounty was substantial." Abigail nodded her acceptance, then asked the question foremost in her mind. "Are you leaving town soon?" Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or something warmer. "Not immediately. Sheriff Miller's asked me to help with another matter. Might be here a few weeks." "I see." Abigail busied herself with examining a shelf of dusty canned goods, afraid her face might reveal too much. "Well, I'm sure you'll be busy, and I certainly have my work cut out for me here." Quinn moved further into the store, his boots leaving tracks in the dusty floor. "It's a good space, prime location, but running it alone won't be easy." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Zabek." "Back to Mr. Zabek, is it?" he asked quietly. Abigail turned to face him. "We're in town now." "People talk. Let them." He took a step closer. "You face down armed men without flinching. Are you really afraid of gossip?" "I'm not afraid," she insisted. "I'm practical. A woman in business already faces enough challenges without adding questionable associations to the mix." Quinn's jaw tightened. "Is that what I am, a questionable association?" "You know what I mean," Abigail said, frustrated by his deliberate misunderstanding. "You're a bounty hunter. You don't stay in one place, and I have responsibilities, to this store, to my family back home. I can't afford distractions." "Is that what I am, a distraction?" He was standing too close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "Yes," she whispered, her resolve weakening. "A very dangerous one." The tension between them stretched like a bowstring pulled taut. For a moment, Abigail thought he might kiss her, part of her hoped he would, consequences be damned. Instead, Quinn stepped back, his expression closing. "Then I won't distract you further, Miss Reeves. Good day." He was gone before she could respond, the bell over the door jangling in his wake. Abigail stood motionless in the dusty store, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had done the right thing, the sensible thing, so why did it feel so wrong? Pushing aside her confused emotions, she turned her attention to the task at hand. The store wouldn't clean itself, and dwelling on Quinn Zabek would accomplish nothing. Over the next week, Abigail threw herself into transforming Harrison's Mercantile. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, took inventory of the remaining stock, and ordered new merchandise from suppliers in Helena and even St. Louis. Her trunk contained not only clothing but account books, catalogs, and correspondence with wholesalers she had initiated before leaving Pennsylvania. The town watched her progress with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and growing respect. A few of the women offered assistance: Mrs. Jenkins from the hotel, the blacksmith's wife, and several ranchers' wives who came into town for supplies. Abigail accepted their help gratefully, recognizing the value of female allies in this male-dominated community. She saw Quinn occasionally from a distance entering the sheriff's office, riding out with Miller, drinking at the saloon. He never approached the store, and she told herself it was for the best. Yet each glimpse of him sent her heart racing and left her distracted for hours afterward. 10 days after her arrival, Abigail finally reopened the store. She had worked through the night arranging displays, pricing items, and ensuring everything was perfect. The result exceeded even her own expectations. Fresh paint brightened the interior, new glass sparkled in the windows, and neatly arranged merchandise filled the previously empty shelves. She had made some innovations as well as a small reading area with a few books and newspapers for sale, a section dedicated to items specifically for women and children, and a notice board where community members could post notices or requests for items not currently stocked. The bell over the door rang frequently that first day as townsfolk came to inspect the transformed establishment. Many came out of curiosity rather than need, but most left having purchased something, even if just a stick of candy or a packet of needles. By closing time, Abigail was exhausted but exhilarated. The day's receipts had exceeded her cautious projections, and several customers had specifically praised her selection and reasonable prices. She was locking the cash in the store's small safe when the bell rang once more. "I'm sorry, we're closed for the day," she called without looking up. "Came to apologize, not to shop," a familiar voice replied. Abigail's head snapped up. Quinn stood just inside the door, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Apologize for what?" she asked, closing the safe and standing up straight. "For walking out the way I did last week." He gestured around the store. "You've done amazing work here. The whole town's talking about it." Pride warmed her cheeks. "Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but worth every blister and backache." Quinn took a tentative step forward. "I was wondering if you might join me for supper at the hotel to celebrate your successful opening." Abigail hesitated. The sensible answer was no. Yet after a week of hard work and loneliness, the prospect of his company was too tempting to resist. "I'd like that," she said finally. "Just let me get my shawl." The hotel dining room was nearly full when they arrived, and their entrance together caused a noticeable lull in conversation before the buzz resumed, likely with speculation about this unexpected pairing. Mrs. Jenkins showed them to a corner table with a knowing smile that Abigail pretended not to notice. Once they were seated and had ordered, an awkward silence fell between them. "How is your work with the sheriff progressing?" Abigail asked, searching for neutral ground. "Well enough," Quinn replied. "Tracking a gang that's been rustling cattle from the north ranches. We think they're selling the stock to the mining camps in the mountains." "Sounds dangerous," he shrugged. "It's what I do." Another silence stretched between them until Quinn spoke again. "You're making quite an impression on Silvercreek. Sheriff Miller's wife couldn't stop talking about your store, said it's better stocked than Harrison ever had it, even in his prime." Abigail smiled, genuinely pleased. Mrs. Miller was very helpful with suggestions for what local families need. "I've tried to stock accordingly, while adding a few items from back east that might appeal to those missing the comforts of civilization. Like those fancy soaps I saw by the counter, smelled like flowers from halfway across the store." "Lavender and rose," Abigail confirmed. "I sold 6 bars today, mostly to minors. One told me he hadn't smelled anything so nice since leaving his mother's home 5 years ago." Quinn's expression softened. "You understand people, Abigail, what they need, even when they don't know it themselves." The use of her given name sent a small thrill through her. "I try to," she said. "A good merchant should provide what customers require, but also introduce them to things that might improve their lives in ways they hadn't considered." "Philosophy and commerce combined," Quinn observed. "You're a remarkable woman." Their food arrived before Abigail could respond to the compliment. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the earlier tension gradually dissipating. "Have you heard from your family?" Quinn asked as they finished their meal. "Not yet. I sent a letter when we arrived, but it will be weeks before I receive a reply." Abigail's expression grew wistful. "I miss them terribly, especially the children. Sarah was just learning to read when I left. It must have been hard leaving them behind." "The hardest thing I've ever done," she admitted, "but necessary. Once the store is established, I hope to bring them here. Montana could be a fresh start for all of us." Quinn studied her face. "You'd bring them to a frontier town. It's not the safest place for a family." "Safer than starvation or being separated by the welfare office," Abigail replied with sudden fierceness. "Besides, Silvercreek is growing. It could be a proper town with schools and churches and opportunities. I want to be part of building that future." Something shifted in Quinn's expression: respect, admiration, and perhaps something deeper. "If anyone could help make that happen, it would be you." Their eyes met across the table, and the connection between them seemed to strengthen, to solidify into something neither could easily dismiss. "Quinn," Abigail began hesitantly, "I need to apologize for what I said at the store, about you being a distraction. It wasn't fair." "But it was honest," he replied, "and not entirely wrong. I am a distraction. I don't stay in one place. My life isn't conducive to attachments." "Is that by necessity or choice?" she asked softly. The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was silent for a long moment before answering. "Both, I suppose, started as necessity, became a habit." "What happened? Mrs. Jenkins mentioned you were once a Texas Ranger." Quinn's expression darkened. That was another life, one that ended badly. Despite her curiosity, Abigail sensed he wouldn't welcome further questions on the subject. "Well, we all have pasts we'd rather not revisit," she said lightly. "The question is whether we let them determine our futures." "Spoken like someone with philosopher tendencies," Quinn said, a small smile returning to his face. "Has anyone ever told you that you're too wise for your years?" "My father, frequently." Abigail returned his smile, though he also said I was too stubborn for my own good. "I can believe that." Quinn's eyes crinkled at the corners when he truly smiled, Abigail noticed. It transformed his entire face, erasing years of hardship. They lingered over coffee, talking of lighter matters, the characters of Silvercreek, the beauty of the Montana landscape, books they had read. Abigail found herself laughing more than she had in months, captivated by Quinn's dry wit and perceptive observations. When he finally walked her back to the rooms behind the store where she had taken up residence, neither seemed eager for the evening to end. "Thank you for supper," Abigail said, standing on the small back porch. "It was a lovely celebration." "Thank you for accepting," Quinn replied. He hesitated, then added, "I'd like to call on you again if you're amenable." The formal phrasing made Abigail smile. "I'd like that very much." In the silvery moonlight, Quinn looked younger, less burdened. He took a step closer, and Abigail's breath caught in her throat. "Abigail," he said softly, "I should warn you that I'm not good at this. At caring for someone, it's been a long time." "Perhaps it's like riding a horse," she suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "The body remembers, even when the mind has forgotten." Quinn's hand came up to gently touch her cheek. "You make me want to remember," he murmured. Then he was bending down, and his lips were on hers tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. The kiss was sweet and searching, his hand cupping her face with surprising tenderness. When they finally parted, Abigail felt breathless and slightly dizzy. "Good night, Quinn," she managed to say, her voice unsteady. "Good night, Abigail," he replied, his own voice deeper than usual. He waited until she was safely inside before turning to leave, his footsteps fading into the quiet night. Alone in her small quarters, Abigail touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. She had come west seeking independence and a fresh start. She hadn't expected to find Quinn Zabek a man who challenged her, respected her, and made her feel things she'd never experienced before. Whatever happened next, she knew her life in Silvercreek had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more interesting. Over the next 2 weeks, Quinn called on Abigail regularly. Sometimes they dined at the hotel, Other times they shared simple meals in her quarters behind the store. They went riding on Sundays, exploring the beautiful country around Silvercreek. Quinn even helped in the store occasionally, using his height to advantage when stocking high shelves or unloading heavy deliveries. The town noticed, of course. Whispers followed them, some disapproving, others merely curious about the unlikely pair, the refined Eastern shopkeeper and the dangerous bounty hunter. Abigail found she cared less than she might have expected. Quinn's company brought her joy, and after years of putting others' needs before her own, she allowed herself this happiness without apology. Still, there remained an unspoken uncertainty between them. Quinn continued his work with Sheriff Miller, tracking the cattle rustlers and maintaining a careful vigilance over the increasingly rowdy mining camps sprouting in the hills. Abigail built her business, establishing credit accounts for regular customers and expanding her inventory based on community needs. Neither spoke of the future, as if by mutual agreement. Yet the question hung in the air during quiet moments: what happened when Quinn's work in Silvercreek was complete? Would he move on as he always had, or had something fundamental changed? The answer came sooner than either expected, on a crisp autumn evening 3 weeks after Abigail's arrival in Silvercreek. She was closing the store when Sheriff Miller burst in, his normally composed face tight with concern. "Miss Reeves, have you seen Quinn today?" Abigail's heart clenched with sudden fear. "Not since yesterday. He mentioned riding out to the North Range with you this morning." Miller nodded grimly. "We split up to cover more ground. He was following tracks toward the eastern hills. Should have been back by noon." "And you think something's happened to him?" Abigail's voice remained steady, though her hands gripped the counter for support. "Don't know for certain," Miller admitted. "But we found his horse about an hour ago, wandering riderless near Cottonwood Creek. No sign of Quinn." The implications didn't need stating. Quinn would never voluntarily separate from Renegade. If the horse had returned without him, something was seriously wrong. "I'm organizing a search party," Miller continued. "We'll head out at first light tomorrow. Abigail's voice rose in disbelief. "He could be injured, bleeding. We need to go now." "It's nearly dark, Miss Reeves. Searching these hills at night is a fool's errand, more likely to get more men hurt than to help Quinn." Abigail knew he was right, but the thought of Quinn lying wounded, alone in the wilderness overnight, was unbearable. "Then I'll go alone," she declared, already reaching for her coat. Miller blocked her path. "You will do no such thing. Quinn would have my hide if I let you ride into those hills alone, especially with those rustlers still out there." "But no buts, Miss Reeves. Best thing you can do for Quinn is stay put and be ready when we bring him back." His tone softened slightly. "I know you care for him, we all do. But rushing out half-cocked won't help him." Reluctantly, Abigail nodded. "Promise me you'll leave at first light. You have my word." Miller hesitated, then added, "Quinn's tough, toughest man I know. If anyone can survive out there, it's him." After the sheriff left, Abigail moved through the evening routine mechanically, counting the day's receipts, locking the safe, checking the doors. Her mind raced with terrible possibilities. Quinn injured, Quinn bleeding, Quinn dead. Each thought was worse than the last. Sleep was impossible. She paced her small quarters, watching the clock tick agonizingly slowly toward dawn. By 4 in the morning, she had made her decision. Sheriff Miller and his men wouldn't leave until first light, at least 2 hours away. But she could be ready to go the moment it was light enough to see. She dressed in her most practical clothes, the split riding skirt she'd purchased for their Sunday excursions, a warm flannel shirt, and sturdy boots. She packed bandages, whiskey for disinfecting wounds, jerky, and a canteen of water. A small derringer went into her pocket, and after a moment's hesitation, she added the rifle Quinn had insisted on teaching her to use, just in case. At the livery stable, the night watchman was initially reluctant to saddle a horse for her at such an hour, but the combination of a generous payment and the news about Quinn changed his mind. By the time the eastern sky showed the first hints of gray, Abigail was riding toward Cottonwood Creek, following directions the watchman had provided. The rising sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber as she reached the creek where Quinn's horse had been found. She She dismounted, tying her borrowed mare to a low branch, and studied the ground as Quinn had taught her during their rides. Her city-bred eyes struggled to make sense of the confusing patterns in the dirt and grass. Hoofprints were everywhere, some fresh likely from Sheriff Miller's men the previous evening, others older and harder to discern. She followed the creek for nearly a mile, searching for any sign of Quinn or a struggle. Nothing. Frustration and fear threatened to overwhelm her. What had she been thinking? She was no tracker, no frontierswoman capable of reading sign like Quinn or the sheriff. This was foolishness, exactly what Miller had warned against, yet she couldn't bring herself to turn back. Somewhere in these hills, Quinn needed help. She could feel it with a certainty that transcended logic. Remounting, she continued eastward toward the hills Quinn had reportedly been investigating. The terrain grew rougher, dotted with pine groves and rocky outcroppings. Each passing hour increased her anxiety, yet she pressed on, scanning the landscape constantly for any sign of movement or disturbance. By midday, she had seen nothing but wildlife deer startled from brush, hawks circling overhead, the occasional rabbit darting across her path. The search party was undoubtedly out by now, probably covering ground much more efficiently than she could alone. Logic suggested she should turn back, let the experienced men handle the search. She had just decided to return to town when a glint of metal caught her eye from a rocky slope about 100 yards ahead. Spurring her horse forward, she approached cautiously. There, wedged between two boulders, was a revolver, Quinn's revolver, the one with the distinctive eagle carved into the grip. Heart pounding, Abigail dismounted and retrieved the weapon. It had been fired recently, the smell of gunpowder still clung to it. Looking up at the rocky hillside, she noticed something she'd missed from a distance, a narrow trail winding upward between the rocks, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. She hesitated only briefly before securing her horse and starting up the trail on foot. If Quinn had lost his gun here, he might be somewhere above. Or whoever had taken him might have left other clues. The path was steeper than it appeared, requiring her to use her hands in places to maintain balance. Her riding skirt caught on jutting rocks, and sweat dampened her shirt despite the cool autumn air. Still, she climbed steadily, Quinn's revolver tucked into her waistband. Near the top, the trail curved around a massive boulder and opened onto a small plateau. What she saw there stopped her cold. A crude camp had been established in a natural depression, 3 tents, a fire pit, and several horses picketed nearby. Men moved about the camp, rough-looking characters with rifles slung across their backs or pistols on their hips. Cattle rustlers, almost certainly. Abigail ducked back behind the boulder, heart racing. She had found the rustlers' hideout, but where was Quinn? Was he even here? Her question was answered moments later when 2 men emerged from the largest tent, dragging a third between them. Even from a distance, she recognized Quinn's tall form, though he seemed unable to stand without support. His face was bloodied, his shirt torn, but he was alive. Relief and fear warred within her as she watched the men shove Quinn roughly to the ground near the fire pit. One kicked him in the ribs, eliciting a grunt of pain that carried clearly to Abigail's hiding place. "Not so tough now, are ya, lawman?" The man taunted loud enough for Abigail to hear. "Sheriff's probably out looking for you, but he won't find this place. By tonight, we'll be long gone and you'll be buzzard food." 6 men that she could see, all armed, against one woman with a derringer and a revolver with unknown ammunition remaining. The odds were impossible. The sensible course was clear: return to town, alert the sheriff, lead the search party back to this location. But they planned to kill Quinn by nightfall. There wasn't time. Abigail closed her eyes, trying to think. What would Quinn do in her place? Assess the situation. Look for advantages. Create a distraction. She opened her eyes with renewed determination and studied the camp more carefully. The horses were picketed on the far side, away from the tents. The men seemed relaxed, confident in their remote location. 2 were cleaning rifles by the fire, one was cooking something in a pot, and the others lounged near the tents. Quinn lay where they had dropped him, apparently either unconscious or wisely feigning it. An idea began to form: desperate, dangerous, with slim chance of success. But it was the only plan she had. Moving with extreme caution, Abigail circled the plateau until she reached the side nearest the picketed horses. The animals shifted nervously as they caught her scent, but didn't make enough noise to alert the men. From her new position, she had a clear view of both the camp and the narrow trail leading down to where her own horse waited. She took a deep breath, checked Quinn's revolver to confirm it held 4 remaining bullets, and aimed carefully at a point just above the horses' heads. The shot exploded in the quiet afternoon, sending birds scattering from nearby trees. The picketed horses reared in panic, several breaking their leads and bolting. Instantly, the camp erupted in chaos. Men shouted, grabbing for weapons, some rushing toward the fleeing horses. In the confusion, Abigail fired again, this time at a stack of supplies near the fire, deliberately missing the men but adding to the mayhem. "We're under attack," someone yelled. "Take cover." The rustlers scattered, seeking shelter behind rocks and tents, firing wildly toward the source of the shots. Abigail had already moved, circling back toward the trail, firing her third shot from a different position to create the impression of multiple attackers. Through the confusion, she kept her eyes on Quinn. He had rolled to the side of the fire pit, using the distraction to drag himself toward the edge of the plateau. He was conscious and moving, that was something. Abigail fired her final shot, then abandoned Quinn's empty revolver and drew her derringer. It held only 2 bullets she would need to make them count. Keeping low, she worked her way back to the trail head, then darted across open ground to where Quinn was struggling to stand. "Quinn." She whispered urgently, reaching his side. "It's me, can you walk?" His eyes widened in shock and dismay. "Abigail, what the hell, no time," she cut him off, slipping her shoulder under his arm for support. "We need to move, now." Despite his injuries, Quinn seemed to understand the urgency. Leaning heavily on Abigail, he staggered toward the trail. Behind them, the rustlers were regrouping, realizing they weren't facing a large force as they had initially feared. "They're getting away," someone shouted. Gunfire erupted, bullets striking rock near their feet as they reached the trail and began the treacherous descent. Quinn was barely conscious, his weight threatening to drag them both down the steep path. Abigail's muscles screamed in protest, but she refused to let go. One careful step at a time, she guided them downward. Quinn's labored breathing harsh in her ear, shouts from above indicated the rustlers were in pursuit. Abigail picked up their pace as much as she dared on the narrow trail, praying they would reach the bottom before their pursuers caught up. Quinn stumbled repeatedly, each time threatening to send them both tumbling down the rocky slope. When they finally reached level ground, Abigail's borrowed mare was nervously pawing the earth, disturbed by the gunfire. She helped Quinn mount, then swung up behind him, one arm wrapped tightly around his waist to keep him in the saddle. "Hold on," she urged, kicking the horse into motion just as the first rustler appeared on the trail above them. More shots rang out, but they were already racing across the open ground toward the shelter of a pine grove. Quinn slumped against her, his consciousness fading again. "Stay with me," Abigail pleaded, spurring the horse to greater speed. "Quinn, please stay with me." For what seemed like hours, they rode hard, changing direction frequently to confuse any pursuit. Quinn drifted in and out of consciousness, but remained in the saddle thanks to Abigail's iron grip around his waist. By late afternoon, she was exhausted, her arms numb from the strain, but she didn't dare stop until she was certain they weren't being followed. As the sun began to set, she finally guided the exhausted horse into a dense thicket near a small stream. Quinn was barely conscious, his breathing shallow, his shirt stiff with dried blood. With great effort, Abigail helped him dismount and settle against a tree trunk. In the fading light, she could finally assess his injuries. A deep gash across his forehead had bled profusely, but looked worse than it was. More concerning were the bruises covering his torso, visible through his torn shirt, and a possible gunshot wound in his left thigh. Using water from her canteen and strips torn from her petticoat, Abigail cleaned his wounds as best she could. The leg injury was a graze rather than a direct hit, painful and bloody, but not life-threatening if infection could be prevented. She used the whiskey to disinfect it, wincing in sympathy when Quinn groaned in pain. "Always knew. You were trouble," he mumbled, his eyes fluttering open. "Didn't expect. This kind." Relief flooded through Abigail at the sound of his voice. "Hush, save your strength," she admonished, continuing her ministrations. "How'd you find me?" Each word seemed to cost him effort. "I followed my heart," she admitted softly, "and got lucky." A ghost of his familiar smile touched his battered face. Some luck riding into Rustler Camp alone. "It worked, didn't it?" Abigail countered, bandaging his leg with the last of her improvised bandages. "Could have been killed." His voice strengthened slightly, anger giving it energy. "Should have stayed in town and let you die." Abigail shook her head firmly. "Not a chance, Quinn Zabek." "Not while I had breath in my body." His expression softened. "Stubborn woman." "Yes," she agreed, brushing matted hair from his forehead. "Now rest. We need to start moving again soon. They could still be searching for us." Quinn closed his eyes, exhaustion claiming him. Abigail settled beside him, one hand resting on his chest to feel the reassuring rise and fall of his breathing. They were far from safe, lost in the wilderness, Quinn badly injured, dangerous men potentially in pursuit. Yet a strange calm had settled over her. She had faced her greatest fear today, the prospect of losing Quinn, and had found strength she never knew she possessed. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same determination. As darkness fell completely, Abigail allowed herself a brief moment of rest, her head leaning against Quinn's shoulder. Just a short respite, she told herself, before they needed to move again. Despite her intentions, exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a deep sleep. She woke with a start to the sound of approaching horses. Dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the trees. Quinn was awake beside her, his hand on his empty holster, his face tense with pain but alert. "Someone's coming," he whispered. "Several riders." Abigail reached for her derringer, though she knew its 2 bullets would do little against multiple attackers. "Rustlers?" Quinn shook his head slightly. "Don't think so, pattern's wrong." He listened intently. "Regular pace, not searching, could be Sheriff Miller's men. Or it could be more rustlers," Abigail pointed out. "We can't take that chance." They held their breath as the hoofbeats grew louder. Through the trees, Abigail caught glimpses of approaching riders, 5 men on horseback. The lead rider wore a familiar hat and silver star. "Sheriff Miller," she called out, rising to her feet. "Over here." The riders turned toward their hiding place, and moments later Sheriff Miller himself pushed through the brush, relief evident on his weathered face. "Miss Reeves," and Quinn thanked God. He dismounted quickly, gesturing for his men to do the same. "We've been searching all night. Half the town's out looking for you too." Quinn managed a weak grin. "Took you long enough, Miller." The sheriff knelt beside him, assessing his injuries with a practiced eye. "You look like hell, my friend. What happened?" While one of the deputies tended to Quinn's wounds with a proper medical kit, Quinn recounted how he'd stumbled upon the rustlers' trail, followed it to their camp, and been ambushed by lookouts before he could report back. "They were planning to move the stolen cattle tonight," he explained. "Heading for the border, probably gone by now." Miller shook his head. "Not gone. We found their camp about an hour ago abandoned, but in a hurry. Looks like they scattered after some kind of attack." He glanced questioningly at Abigail. "Would you know anything about that, Miss Reeves?" Abigail lifted her chin. "I created a distraction." "A distraction?" Quinn repeated incredulously. "She rode into a camp of armed rustlers alone and started shooting to make them think they were under attack." Miller's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "You did what?" "What was necessary," Abigail replied simply. "They were going to kill him." The sheriff looked from Abigail to Quinn and back again, something like admiration dawning in his eyes. "Well, I'll be damned." "Begging your pardon, Miss Reeves. That's either the bravest or the most foolhardy thing I've ever heard." "That's what I keep telling her," Quinn said, wincing as the deputy tightened a fresh bandage around his thigh. "Brave and foolhardy in equal measure." Abigail met his gaze steadily. "I wasn't about to let you die, Quinn. Not when I could do something about it." Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings too deep for casual expression, a recognition of what they had become to each other. The journey back to Silvercreek was slow, with frequent stops to allow Quinn to rest. His injuries, while painful, weren't life-threatening, but he had lost blood and was weak from his ordeal. Abigail rode beside the wagon they had brought for transporting injured men, refusing to leave Quinn's side despite her own exhaustion. Word of their return spread quickly through town. By the time they reached Silvercreek, a crowd had gathered on Main Street, watching anxiously as the procession made its way to Doc Wilson's clinic. Whispers followed Abigail as she walked alongside the wagon, some of admiration, others of disbelief that a shopkeeper, a woman, had done what seasoned men might hesitate to attempt. At the clinic, Doc Wilson shooed everyone out while he examined Quinn thoroughly. Abigail waited in the small anteroom, refusing all suggestions that she go home and rest until she had heard the doctor's assessment. When Wilson finally emerged, his expression was reassuringly calm. He'll be fine with rest and proper care. Cracked ribs, numerous contusions, that leg wound needs watching for infection, and he's got a concussion from a blow to the head. But he's tough, should be up and about in a week or so. Relief washed over Abigail like a physical wave. May I see him? The doctor nodded, briefly. He needs rest, but he's asking for you. Quinn lay on a narrow bed, clean bandages replacing Abigail's makeshift ones, his face pale but his eyes clear as she entered. There she is, he said softly. My rescuer. Abigail moved to his bedside, taking his hand in hers. How are you feeling? Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo. His thumb stroked the back of her hand. But alive thanks to you. I was so afraid, she admitted, the events of the past 24 hours catching up with her, when Sheriff Miller said you were missing. SHH. Quinn squeezed her hand. It's over now. Abigail shook her head. When I thought I might lose you, I realized something, Quinn. All my talk about distractions and responsibilities, it was fear talking, fear of caring for someone who might leave. Abigail, please let me finish. She took a deep breath. I came west for independence, yes, for a fresh start. But I've discovered that true independence isn't about being alone. It's about choosing who to let into your life, who to care for, who to build something with. Quinn's eyes never left her face. And have you made that choice? I have. Her voice was steady now, certain. I choose you, Quinn Zabek, if you'll have me. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it despite the bruises and bandages. I was planning to ask you the same question once I'd finished this job with Miller. Had it all planned out, dinner at the hotel, maybe a ring if I could afford something nice. I don't need a ring, Abigail said. I just need you. You've got me. Quinn raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. For as long as you want me. Though I should warn you, I'm not much good at staying in one place. Maybe you just haven't found the right place to stay, Abigail suggested. Or the right reason. Their eyes met in perfect understanding. Doc Wilson cleared his throat from the doorway, reminding Abigail that her visit was supposed to be brief. Rest now, she told Quinn, reluctantly releasing his hand. I'll come back tomorrow. Abigail, Quinn called as she reached the door. What you did out there riding into that camp alone. It was reckless and dangerous, and the bravest thing I've ever seen. She smiled. Just remember that the next time you try to tell me what I can't do. His laughter followed her out, warming her heart and lightening her steps despite her exhaustion. The story of Abigail's daring rescue spread through Silvercreek like wildfire, growing more elaborate with each retelling. By the time she reopened the store 3 days later, she had become a local legend, the Eastern lady who had outwitted a gang of rustlers and saved the bounty hunter. Business boomed as curious townsfolk came to see the woman behind the story, many purchasing items they didn't strictly need just to have a chance to speak with her. Quinn recovered quickly under Doc Wilson's care and Abigail's frequent visits. 2 weeks after the rescue, he was well enough to move into the small apartment behind the store, initially just until he was fully recovered. Though both understood this temporary arrangement was the beginning of something permanent. Sheriff Miller and his deputies, using information Quinn had gathered, eventually captured most of the rustling gang, bringing a new sense of security to the region. The success enhanced Miller's reputation and Quinn's as well, leading to an unexpected offer from the town council, the position of permanent deputy sheriff for Silvercreek. Me, a lawman again. Quinn seemed genuinely surprised when he told Abigail about the offer over supper one evening. "After all this time, is it something you'd want?" Abigail asked, watching his face carefully. Quinn considered the question seriously. "Might be. It would mean staying in one place, putting down roots. And is that something you're ready for?" His eyes met hers across the table. "With the right person beside me. Yes, I believe it is." Winter came to Montana with a vengeance, deep snow and biting cold that transformed Silvercreek into a landscape of white and gray. Yet inside Harrison's Mercantile, now officially renamed Reeves General Store, warmth and light prevailed. Abigail had expanded her inventory to include winter necessities and small luxuries that made the harsh season more bearable. A pot-bellied stove kept the interior cozy, and on particularly cold days, she offered free coffee to customers who came in to escape the chill. Quinn thrived in his new role as deputy, his experience and natural authority earning him respect throughout the community. Those who had initially viewed him as a dangerous drifter now tipped their hats when he passed. He still rode out occasionally to track outlaws or investigate disturbances in outlying areas, but he always returned to Abigail. As Christmas approached, Abigail received the letter she had been waiting for. Her mother and siblings would arrive on the stage in the new year. The Mercantile was prospering, allowing her to send enough money for their journey and to prepare comfortable accommodations for their arrival. "Are you nervous?" Quinn asked when she shared the news. "About them coming here, a little," Abigail admitted. "It's so different from what they're used to, but they'll adapt as I have, and they'll love you," she added with certainty. Quinn looked less convinced. "I'm not exactly the kind of man mothers dream of for their daughters." "You are exactly the man I dreamed of," Abigail countered, "even when I didn't know it myself." On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, Quinn and Abigail sat before the fireplace in their small living quarters. The store was closed, the town quiet as families gathered for the holiday. A small pine tree, cut from the nearby hills and decorated with paper ornaments, candles, and strings of cranberries, stood in the corner. "I have something for you," Quinn said, reaching into his pocket. "It's not much, but—" He held out a small box wrapped in brown paper. Abigail unwrapped it carefully to reveal a velvet jeweler's box. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band set with a small diamond that caught the firelight. "Quinn," she breathed, speechless for once. "I know we've already decided on our future together," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "But I wanted to do this properly. Abigail Reeves, will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "With all my heart, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Abigail marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a frightened young woman hiding in an abandoned barn to the respected proprietor of Silvercreek's General Store. From a woman determined to stand alone to one who had found strength in loving and being loved. "What are you thinking?" Quinn asked, drawing her close beside him on the small sofa. "About how different my life is from what I imagined when I left Pennsylvania," she replied honestly. "Better, in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Any regrets?" Abigail shook her head. "Not one. You, only that it took me so long to find you." Quinn's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I spent years wandering, never staying anywhere long enough to form attachments. I told myself it was because of what happened in Texas, but really I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of caring too much, of losing someone again." His voice grew quieter. "My wife and son died of fever while I was away on a ranger mission. I couldn't save them. After that, it seemed easier not to love at all." Abigail turned to face him, cupping his cheek in her palm. "I'm so sorry, Quinn, I didn't know. Few people do." He covered her hand with his own. "But I want you to know everything about me, Abigail, the good and the bad, the man I was and the one I'm trying to become." "I love all of you," she said simply. "The man you were, the man you are, and the man you will be." Snow continued to fall outside their window, transforming Silvercreek into a pristine wonderland. Inside, the fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across the walls of the small room that had become their sanctuary. "You remember what those rustlers said when they had me captive?" Quinn asked after a comfortable silence. "Before you came charging in like an avenging angel," Abigail frowned, trying to recall. Something mocking, wasn't it? Quinn nodded. You're not strong enough, they said, laughed about it too, how the great Quinn Zabek had finally met his match. They were wrong, Abigail stated firmly. No, they were right. Quinn's blue eyes were serious in the firelight. I wasn't strong enough, not alone, but then you came, and I remembered what I told Miller when he questioned how a slip of a woman from back east could survive the frontier. What did you tell him? Quinn's face softened with the memory. She's stronger than us all, I said. And I meant it, Abigail. Your kind of strength, it's rarer and more valuable than being good with a gun or handy in a fight. It's the strength to see beyond the surface, to believe in possibilities, to risk everything for love. Tears welled in Abigail's eyes at his words. We're stronger together, she whispered. That's what matters. As midnight approached, bringing Christmas Day to Silvercreek, Quinn and Abigail remained before the fire, planning their future together, a spring wedding, a growing business, a family of their own someday to join the siblings Abigail would soon welcome to their Montana home. Outside, the wild country slumbered beneath its blanket of snow, the frontier town quiet in the holy night. Inside, love had transformed two solitary souls into something greater than either could have been alone, a partnership founded on respect, cemented by shared danger, and sustained by a love neither had been looking for, but both had desperately needed. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Zabek-to-be, Quinn murmured, pressing a kiss to Abigail's temple. Merry Christmas, Deputy Zabek, she replied, nestling closer in his embrace. As the last embers of the fire cast their golden glow across the room, Abigail thought once more of how far she had come from that terrified woman in the abandoned barn. The journey had been dangerous, unpredictable, and nothing like she had planned. But it had led her here to this man, this life, this love, and she wouldn't change a single step.